Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on the effects of role ambiguity, schedule flexibility, and stress level on worker burnout. We are Team IOU a Break. We consist of members Madison Reddick, Claudia Malero, Madeline McCurry, and myself, Dominique Morris. So here's our brief overview of our presentation. We're going to be speaking, of course, with a brief introduction, our hypotheses of the project, the scales, methods, and demographics, as well as the results and discussion of the project. And we will also offer some recommendations as well as the references as well. So for a brief introduction, we want to speak of what was the objective of our project. It's ultimately to understand the effects of role ambiguity, schedule flexibility, and workplace toxicity on worker burnout. And there is the reason for this as well. What is burnout, right? Burnout is, of course, this general feeling of being too, for lack of a better word, burn out to do a work. Ultimately, it will lead to a decrease in productivity as well as fatigue when it comes to employees filling out their duties for their job. Our interest is to understand what are the indicators or what are the things that can really affect worker burnout in order to, of course, limit those within workers and create healthier workers and more productive workers that are ultimately satisfied with what they do.
Firstly, our research group was curious to know how unclear expectations about a worker's role in their organization might impact their level of burnout. Based on prior research by psychologists Van Sel, Fried, Paraserman, and Alotto, our research group hypothesized that role ambiguity, defined as a lack of clarity in the expectations of a role, methods of meeting role expectations, and consequences associated with the role, increases, then worker burnout can be expected to increase. That is, we expect to find role ambiguity is positively related to worker burnout. Worker burnout can be characterized as a state in which an employee experiences emotional exhaustion, depersonalizes relationships with their employer and coworkers, and exhibits lowered personal accomplishment. Increasing role ambiguity can be expected to increase worker burnout because prior studies have demonstrated role ambiguity results in increased work stress and decreased job performance. Role ambiguity may contribute to the emotional exhaustion and decreased personal accomplishment that constitute worker burnout, because prior studies indicate lack of clear information about a role divides the cognitive resources a worker has to cope with stressors and can lead workers performing duties they did not anticipate being part of their role. Schedule flexibility can be defined as the degree of agency a worker has in choosing their work hours and vacation time. As remote work has become increasingly common and necessary during the COVID-19 pandemic, our research group was curious to know how a worker's level of schedule flexibility affects their level of burnout. Our research group hypothesized that if schedule flexibility increases, then worker burnout can be expected to decrease. This hypothesis is based on prior research by psychologists Hill, Carlson, Shulkin, and Jamal, which has found schedule flexibility is associated with better work-family balance, and burnout is associated with non-standard work schedules, particularly work occurring outside of the hours 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Workplace toxicity can be defined in terms of 4 classes of behaviors that can negatively impact a workplace and its workers: self-centered behaviors, aggressive behaviors, unethical behaviors, and rigid behaviors. Our research group was curious to know how workplace toxicity, which can manifest in the workplace, for example, as spreading baseless rumors, speaking offensively to others, or breaking institutional rules, affects levels of worker burnout. In prior research, psychologists Pelletier, Holloway, and Kusi have found that high workplace toxicity decreases workers' self-esteem scores and reported loyalty to their organization, while increasing measures of worker anxiety and emotional exhaustion. Based on these findings, our research group hypothesized that as workplace toxicity increases, then worker burnout can be expected to increase. We expected to find this positive relationship because we expect workers with heightened anxiety will lack the cognitive resources to achieve personal accomplishments, and that lowered worker loyalty to their workplace could translate to increasingly depersonalized relationships with employers and coworkers, with depersonalized work relationships and lowered personal accomplishment being key characteristics of burnout. To capture our research group's variables of interest, a scale of each variable was drawn from the literature and condensed into a survey format in which respondents reported their degree of agreement with each item, ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Items from Maslach's 2012 burnout inventory were used as a scale of burnout, with statements such as, "I feel emotionally drained from my work," and "I feel fatigued when I get up in the morning and have to face another day on the job," provided. Items from Rizzo et al.'s 1970 role ambiguity scale were used as a scale of role ambiguity, with statements such as, "When at work, I know what my responsibilities are," and "When at work, I feel certain about how much authority I have," provided. Items from Caslak's 2019 Perceived Organizational Toxicity Scale were used as a scale of workplace toxicity, with statements such as, "Groundless rumors are spread in the workplace," and "Rude behaviors are displayed in the workplace," provided. Items from Albion's 2004 Flexible Work Options Questionnaire were used as a scale of schedule flexibility, with statements such as, "Working more flexible hours is essential for me to attend to family responsibilities," and "Working shorter hours would negatively impact my career progress within the organization," provided.
The survey consisted of 4 scales. The first was for the dependent variable, which was worker burnout. The next 3 were for the independent variables, which were job ambiguity, schedule flexibility, and stress level. Each scale contained 4 items and 5 possible answers ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. There were a total of 31 people who successfully completed the submissions, and we had a diverse pool of participation. As far as the demographics go, we had 31 successfully completed submissions. 58% of those people were white/Caucasian, 35% were Hispanic, Latino, or of Spanish origin, 13% were Asian, and some respondents identified with multiple races and ethnicities. The average age was 26 years old, and the gender ratio was 36% male, 58% female, and 6% of other or prefer not to answer. The results and discussion for Hypothesis 1. Our hypothesis was if role ambiguity increases, then worker burnout can be expected to increase as well. The results of this hypothesis were the correlation coefficient was 0.461, the p-value was 0.0090, which is less than 0.05, and then the coefficient alpha was 0.867, which was greater than 0.7. And so the takeaway based on the data is that the hypothesis is supported because the p-value is lower than 0.05.
For hypothesis 2, which states if schedule flexibility increases, then worker burnout can be expected to decrease, the results were a correlation coefficient of 0.144, a p-value of 0.438, and a Cronbach's coefficient alpha of 0.763, ensuring internal consistency. From this, our takeaway is that the hypothesis is not supported because the p-value is greater than 0.05 and because R is positive when we were expecting it to be the opposite because we expected the flexibility to increase when worker burnout can be expected to decrease. For hypothesis 3, which states if workplace toxicity increases, then workout burnout can be expected to increase, the results were a correlation coefficient of 0.309, a p-value of 0.0912, a Cronbach's coefficient of alpha 0.741, again ensuring that we have internal consistency. From this, our takeaway is that the hypothesis is not supported because the p-value is greater than 0.05. According to the results, only one hypothesis was accepted, and that was role ambiguity should be reduced to reduce worker burnout. We can do that by providing more detailed role descriptions and setting expectations with the employees routinely so that they are aware of what the expectations are for them. This would mostly concern training managers to pay more attention to the way that they describe the roles to the employees and give overall more time to that. To continue this work further, it is recommended to continue studying hypothesis 2 and 3. Specifically, flexibility had a really interesting result in that we expected it to come out with a negative correlation, but instead we saw a positive correlation. And so it would be interesting to study both extremes. Is it possible that worker burnout is increased when we have more flexibility? And lastly, it's important to increase the pool of participants to get overall better data. These are our references, and thank you very much for listening.